Hello again, Steve here with a little bit of a conversation on some thoughts that came to me this morning when I was out for a run. I don't know about something about running. It seems to shake everything out, and it helps me to get clarity on different things that are percolating up. And a bit of a tagline came out of the whole self conversation, which is that health equals control, character equals the soul. You know, not very poetic, but hey, I'll go with it. Now, I've chatted about this before about how, individually, we could say objectively or measurably or experientially for sure, we could say that individually we are body, or we have a body anyway, and we have mental capacities, right? And we also have emotions through which we experience the effects of our mind, you might say, as it interacts with the world and with others. And in a similar way that the body has sensory organs to experience the world. It's sort of like the emotions might be akin to the senses of the mind, whereas the senses of touch, smell, and whatnot are the sensory experiences of the physical body. But the question is this what we really are? And the ancients, of course, they always talked about this soul, right? The soul is the essence. And that if you derive the word soul, right, if you start looking at it, you can come to realize that it's very similar to the word solo. At least it sounds like that, which is like this one, right? The oneness, the core, right? And it's an interesting conversation because, if we think of people who we admire, very much admire, that we admire for hundreds and maybe even thousands of years, it's not their body or their mind or their emotions or whatever. It's what comes through in terms of their virtues, right? I mean, sure, we might admire somebody who's really fit, but if we really get deep into it, we admire their work ethic, for example, that would cause them to get fit. If they're just naturally young and youthful and so on, that might not be a point of admiration. But somebody who's like 70 years old and still able to do a marathon, I mean, yes, they had good luck in terms of their joint genetics and what have you, but still that's an ethic, that's a work ethic, and we could admire that in them, that virtue. So that's not so much the body in itself, the mind in itself, or the emotions in and of themselves. It's what's governing them, right? And the result is the building of the person in a way. Like we have this person means this mask, this what we build of ourselves. And based on how we control, lots of stuff is genetic, right? A huge amount of what we have is genetic. But there's those aspects of our person building that we can affect and drive in certain directions. Now, this guy, Jordan Peterson, he talks a lot about these 5 personality traits. And these personality traits, it seems like they're somewhat malleable, right? Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Well, take, for example, extroversion. Well, somebody might be very introverted naturally, but they can work on themselves to become like more extroverted. In which case they build a personality type upon themselves, and they can come to govern themselves accordingly. And this is where the tagline comes in, which is that health equals control. So it's like there's the body, the mind, and the emotions, but it's being governed by our humanity. That's the distinction between us and the lowly creatures. Humanity or human nature is not just man. If we were to find a creature deep in the crust of the earth or whatever who could reason with us on a level like us, they would have to be afforded the same human rights recognition that we have. They'd have to be. They would have a different body. They would have a lot of different aspects in terms of their individual makeup, but they would have to be recognized as being human. And this is why I object to this, the replacing of the word man with the word human, because it's not equivalent, right? So that's an aside, though, and I tend to charge off sometimes. But anyways, coming back to this, I think it's important for us to recognize the responsibility we have, really, over the body, over the mind, and over our emotions, to, no matter what we call it, we could call it soul, we could call it character. I like to call it character because it's more everyday rather than old religiosity terminology. But how we develop our character or our personality, we have some control over that. We have decisions whether we're going to be more neurotic or less neurotic. I mean, we may have the tendency to be neurotic, but that doesn't mean we have to be all the time. We can work on ourselves in terms of placating our internal fears and whatnot. We can become more extroverted. I used to be incredibly introverted, and I still am. That is my nature, actually. But I'm able to come out into public and be more, people think I'm extroverted now. That's the odd thing about it. If they knew me when I was a teenager or in my early 20s, they wouldn't think that way. But they didn't know me. Most people don't know me from that perspective. Agreeableness. Well, there is a tendency, as an example, for men to be less agreeable and women to be more agreeable. But it doesn't mean we can't learn to be more agreeable if that's beneficial in some way. It doesn't mean we can't learn, if we're very agreeable, to be less agreeable, because we have those abilities within us. Even this Myers-Briggs system, not that I understand it or agree with it all, but even they, within their studies, agreed that even though there can be a dominant trait within us, it doesn't mean we can't work on another trait to level things out a bit. So that's our human nature. That's part of our human nature, this decision. And that's I think probably why a lot of the religious people and so on, they weren't scientific, but they were more empirical and trying to explain things through stories. They would say that an animal doesn't have a soul, because an animal is more governed by the pure genetics and the pure natural tendencies of drives within the body and within its emotions to go in certain directions, whereas humans can control those. And what I mean by, and when I say control equals health, or health is equal to control, we have health is a combination of many different aspects. It's a blend of the physical body, of the mind, and of the emotions, and being under a control of some way. If we let our emotions fly off the handle, then we look like we're emotionally unhealthy. If our minds tear off in all kinds of directions and we're not able to bring it back and focus on something, then we can say we're mentally unhealthy, right? And if we allow our bodies the urges of our bodies to just go into whatever we want and eat butter tarts all day, we're gonna have the results. And animals, a lot of times they're controlled. Their governor is not a sense of a soul or a character so much. It's more of an instinct, which drives, and their controls are based on nature, right? So an animal won't eat to the point of becoming obese very often in nature because it runs out of food, and it gets very thin, according to the cycles of the season and what have you. But if you allow an animal, because I grew up on a farm, and certain types of legumes, like, say, alfalfa, if you just let the cows run into an alfalfa field completely unfettered, they basically almost blow up because they don't know how to stop eating. It's like they're into an unnatural setting, and they have this drive to eat based on the gastronomical enjoyment of it. But they don't have a human nature or a character to be able to control themselves in some way. They don't have personality traits that are controllable by them in some way. But this is, I think, what the real us is. what really separates us as human. And there are, you can see it within humanity, even within humanity. Those who got greater control over their humanity and those who got less control over their humanity. And I'm not necessarily talking about high levels of intelligence or the low levels of intelligence. That has something to do with it too, as far as I know. But the ability to tap into those personality traits and control them and adjust them accordingly. That is the example of the humanity bubbling up and being the governor. So it's an internal governor of. And so our individual health is in our control because we have internal governorship. I mean, it's not completely under our control. Hey, we're going to expire at some point, right? But the degree to which we can adjust it, physically, mentally, and emotionally, is the degree to which we have control over our humanity, I would say. And the last part, the second part, of course, is the character is equal to soul. The only reason why I came up with that was, the word character or personality is a little bit more broadly understood by people. As soon as somebody says soul, sometimes there's a certain number of people who's going to, okay, now you're going to start lecturing me on, religion or preaching or something like that, right? But that's just, to me, that's like what the New Age people say, the essence of what we are is this, what we are really deep inside in terms of distinguishes us from everybody else, and it's long-term memorable. I mean, somebody will say, even if we heard the term many times before, that's an interesting character, or I like the character of that person or whatever. That's not in reference to their body or their mind or their emotions, really. It's the body and the mind and the emotions and what's going on in their actions, because that's what it really comes down to, is actions. All those things are a reflection of the character, right? So if somebody is able to go up and do a public speech with great degree of confidence, whereas years before they might have been very introverted, and they're able to become more extroverted through training and what have you, and they're able to calm down their neurotic nature to be fearful of that sort of thing, then somebody could admire that character, right? There's not a lot of objective change in the body or the mental capacity, no more intelligence or whatever. The emotions are still there. But that individual has gained control over their individuality. And somehow they've brought that in. And that's why I think, because the ancients perhaps didn't understand this as much, but they understood it in terms of externalizing things because so much of the world was objective. So this was seen as a god, an amazing power that one could grab hold of. And of course, the Christians turned that into the personal God, which is extremely powerful because we understand relationships more than we understand abstractions. So you have this personal relationship with God which enters your heart. And that feels like, it's something unexplainable. But it's then directing amazing power to be able to control mind, body, and emotions. And as a result, have greater health in so many ways, in personal success, in more healthy relationships, more healthy control of diet and exercise to become healthier, more direction and power and focus of mind, more ability to control flippant emotions that might have been even messed up in childhood and what have you. All of that leads to greater health, I would say, general, holistic health, which is what really health means in its origin and its derivation. And it actually makes us more memorable for posterity as well, because we're seen for our character rather than our, physical this or mental that or prowess or whatever it is that we have. That's sort of very transient, whereas character is like this. And that's the other reason why I think that soul was seen as immortal, because when somebody develops a really unbelievable character, they're remembered in posterity. And people want to emulate that. Think of the greats in history who we admire. It's not the tyrants. It's those peaceful characters who went about and helped people to become better for themselves. Anyway, Steve here, great chatting, and I hope that was helpful. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share, and please comment in the box below. Talk again soon. Bye for now.